Hi, and welcome to the Aga Wilson Show. Today I have the honor to sit here with Catherine Austin Fitz. And Catherine is an American investment banker and former public official who served during the presidency of George W. Bush as United States Assistant Secretary in Housing and Urban Development for Housing. She has widely written and commented on the subject of public spending and has alleged several large-scale instances of government fraud. So and so much more, Catherine. I mean, you've been around and you've been really a great person and asset in our movement, and you've done incredible work. So welcome, and so
and
nice
thank
to
you
see
for
you.
having me, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you so much. That is really a great compliment. So thank you for that. So I think my first question to you is, since we just kicked off the new year, and I think there's a lot of turbulence and a lot of insecurities coming. So I would want to start with asking you, what do you see for this year? Maybe, in terms of challenges, what's coming? What can you see in your crystal ball for this year?
So we just recorded on December 30th. We just published it last week. It's public. Anybody can go see it. It's hilarious. We did it. It's called the 2030 Backcasting. And we took 9 of the show hosts and key allies from the Solari Report. And here was the storyline. The storyline was, it's 2030, freedom has won. Klaus Schwab is in a deep depression. He's in his home in his Alps drinking Pepto-Bismol. And, knowing that they completely failed. And we're sitting around the campfire and we're telling the stories of how freedom won and what a pivotal year 2023 was. And so everybody told their stories of what happened in 2023 to save the day for freedom. And it was very interesting. And, we had different people concentrating on different areas: food, health, money. And what happened was, by the time it was over, we were all in such a great mood. It's like, yes! 2023, let's go. And what I heard from everyone, and the feeling, the spirit of the thing was, 2023 was the year we got out of fear. We just said, that's it, we're out of fear. These people are too creepy. We're kicking them out. And so that's my feeling for the years. 2023 is the year we come roaring out of fear, because the human race got surprised. It got knocked on its heels. There were some of us who weren't surprised. We anticipated, we knew these kinds of things were going to happen. So we didn't necessarily get put in the corner for fear, but, it was hard for many people to believe that a financial operation could be this big and this sort of dirty, and so, but now people are coming out of fear. So my theme for the year is the human race comes out of fear, and we're going to get a lot done. The other thing is, when you look at what's happening in the stock market and you look at what's happening in the consumer businesses, what you see very quietly is there a revolution of citizens pushing back, but in very quiet ways. It's almost as though the trance has been broken and people are pushing it back, but you wouldn't know it unless you were looking at the consumer statistics and the consumer markets and the stock market.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a couple consumer stocks get absolutely slaughtered because people are saying, this transhumanist crap, we don't want it. We're walking away from you, and the stocks are going like this. It's unbelievable. So, and it wasn't until I really digested the top stories of the year for, we do an annual wrap up, that I started to look, and I said, the revolution is happening. A perfect example is if you look at people who are using cash. There are reports of thousands of people going out and buying checks for the first time in their life and starting to use checks, who don't know how to use checks because they're, they don't remember checks. Anyway, so you see it in the cash revolution. You really see it in the United States of people who are using cash and saying, we understand the dangers of an all digital system. We don't want it. Anyway, so I feel very positive about 2023. The other reason is, if you look at a poll from Rasmussen, the most recent Rasmussen poll in the United States, 48% of the population attributes the rise in all-cause mortality and the deaths to the injection, and says, it could be that. 1 out of 4, 25% say they know somebody was killed by the injection. or seriously disabled, I think. Anyway, so if you look at those numbers, it's almost as though the trance is breaking. If you see what's causing the trance to break, it's both the deaths and the disability. It's also inflation. You know, the political equation in America was always you give me the story, the official narrative, and then you give me a check. And as long as the check is big enough, I'll go along with the story. Inflation is taking away the check. And so Ed Dowd just did an interview where he said 2,500 people a day are dropping from the workforce because of the rise in deaths, and 5,000 in disability. I know in 2021, disability was up by about 3 million. So you know, for whether it's what I call the great poisoning or it's in the inflation, you know, that's changing the political equation in extraordinary ways, certainly in America, and also certainly the inflation in Europe. So I think, you know, there's going to be a pivot here, and it's still, for people like you and me, it's a huge question mark. Can 48% go to 80%? Because that's when you get incredible change. And that change doesn't have to be loud and noisy. That change can be in people shunning, you know, the bad guys and starting to embrace their local farmer. We're just about to publish something on the Solari Report. I'll send it to you when it's done. It's by a wonderful Dutch reporter on synthetic food. Now, if you haven't totally embraced doing gardening and getting to know your local farmer, you know, when you read this, that's it.
Yeah, I actually started growing. We started growing our own food the last 2 summers now in Sweden, and it's been amazing. Not only, you know, to grow it, but to eat something that you have, you know, been part of producing yourself, you know, and been in contact with, close contact with. So I think, you know, it's a very inspiring thing. But going back to the cash, because, you know, now I'm in the US, as you know, and I love it because, you know, I can take out money, I can go and pay with cash everywhere. But when I'm in Sweden,
it's impossible.
It's impossible. I mean, you can do it maybe like in the food store and possibly in the liquor store, but most places don't take cash anymore. And I'm trying always to figure out, like, how can we turn this around as Swedish people, you know, and do that, because they simply won't take it.
Well, in the States, in a lot of places, people are walking out and saying, if you don't take cash, I won't shop here. And there's enough people who take cash that you can do that. And in fact, we have states passing laws that make it difficult for, you know, for private businesses not to take cash or encourage them to take cash. So we have a much higher percent of the population who are not banked, and a much higher percent of the population who still use cash. So I live in Tennessee, and in the community I live in, there are a significant number of people who've never had a bank account and don't want one because they want privacy, and they know it's the only way they're going to get it. And they can still, between the check cashing places, between the post office with money orders, Western Union, dropping by and paying in cash at the utility, or going to the grocery store and paying your phone bill there, you know, they still have many, many ways of paying with cash.
Yeah, which is impossible in Sweden, and they make it so hard for you if you don't have an account, if you don't have all of these, you know, apps to send money and pay for with, you know, it's absolutely.
Well, here it's interesting because, you know, Solari is a subscription service. So I have 2 businesses, one on the investment side and one is the Solari Report. And when the online payment services started to censor people, I said, look, we're going to have to go to check and cash. And we set up a whole series of ways you could pay us with cash or check or ACH through the banking system. And we thought this was going to be, I mean, it's an enormous amount of work to convert from, you know, from an online payment system to doing it this way. And our bookkeeping team is fantastic. They did a great job. But I think we're headed, I think by the end of the month, we'll probably be at about 40% paying with check or cash. And as a business person, that makes me feel much more resilient than, you know, because the online payment systems can decide to censor and boom, you're, you know, that's it. And in some cases they freeze and steal your money. So yeah.
And we've seen it happen even with the convoy in Canada when they started freezing people's accounts. So it's, you know, to me it's getting really scary, and especially if we're gonna say things they don't want us to say, or other things, they can just completely block
Well,
us.
here's, to me, the number one issue we face is we're dealing with a governance system that works through, I call it the central banking warfare machinery. You basically have the central bankers print money, and then you have the military and intelligence agencies make sure people take them. So it's basically financial force and military force. And what the central bankers want to go to is a central bank digital currency that gives them complete central control. And, I always play that video. You can find it on my homepage, of the head of the Bank of International Settlements in 56 seconds explaining, we will have central control, we can make the rules, and we can enforce them centrally. Which means if they don't want you shopping more than 5 kilometers or 5 miles from your home, you can't shop more than 5, your money will turn off. Or if they want your money to not pay for chocolate, then you can't buy chocolate with your money. And they call it their money, not yours. It's an expression of central bank liability. It's not your money. So what that does is that create complete transactional control. If we go to an all digital system, and the problem isn't central bank digital currency, the problem is a 100% digital system that can be controlled centrally. And it's not a currency, it's a transaction control system. And if I can control all of your financial transactions and marry it with a digital ID, then I have complete control of you, your family, your household. And what I say is, I can turn your world, your home, your car, your community into a digital concentration camp. And that's why, if you look at tactically all the different things we're fighting, whether it's different healthcare policies or different financial policies, to me, the number one issue is we have to maintain transactional freedom. Because if we don't maintain transactional freedom, if we go to an all digital transaction system that can be centrally controlled, then they can mandate every policy you can think of. Every mandate we stop, they can reinstitute those mandates if we go to that kind of control. So now if you look at, they're also trying to get control of the food system, control of the health system. And one of the things, my key points in looking back at 2022, they've run into enough trouble on getting the transactional control that I think the reason they want the WHO Treaty and the IHR amendments and sort of the climate change and all these healthcare controls are really a way of it's a bridge to get you to that complete control. So let's say it takes them till 2025 or 2030 to get, a digital ID, CBDC transactional lockdown. They need a bridge from here to there, particularly to manage inflation. Because if the central bankers manage inflation with monetary policy, they're going to face the guillotine. So they need a way of managing inflation that doesn't look like it's them. And the WHO and the healthcare policies are an absolutely brilliant way for them to create demand destruction without it being clear it's the bankers. So I think what's happening with the WHO and the One Health policies are all part of building the bridge you need to control. And then ultimately, even to do transaction control, you need to control an asset class. The West has lost control of the petrodollar, so now I think they want food. And that's why, you're growing your own food is such a great and important thing, because if we can all do it, and continue to keep the small farmers going and alive, then we have the ability to eat food. And that means we can always create our own transaction system outside their control grid. But this is so simple. We don't have a health problem. We don't have a financial problem. We have a governance problem. We have a secret governance system, and the secret governance system has decided the only way they can maintain control is use digital technology to go to complete control. And that's what has to be stopped. We cannot accept central control using digital mechanisms, because then we're talking about a slavery system. It's that bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, going back to, because you and I are both aware of how many things are happening now simultaneously and they throw at us. It's the climate change, it's the COVID, it's the vaccinations, it's so many things at once. So for this year, what do you think is the most important thing to focus on in order to protect ourselves? What can we as citizens, global citizens, do to
so the first thing you need to know is there's a huge amount you can do. I mean, and it's important what you do, it counts. So their most effective tactic is getting you to believe it's hopeless. I'm only one person, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. So just reject that, and reject fear. And I was talking about, the fact that the sixth part of our Building Wealth curriculum is called Turtle Forth. What's important is that you do everything you can do in your daily life, and you do it in a way that gives you energy. So use cash, because what we need to do is keep the system from becoming 100% digital. And I don't care if it's CBDC or Bitcoin or Visa. We could do a 100% digital system with Visa, and they could have transactional control, right? So the important thing is not which aspects of digital are good or bad. What we want is a system which is both analog and digital, and we want to preserve the analog system. So use cash, build cash whenever and however you can. That's number one. Number two, do everything you can to stop supporting and financing the guys who are building the central control train tracks. So stop using QR codes. I still have the world's oldest smartphone, but I turn it off. I leave it in the car. I put it in a Faraday bag. I don't let it, I use it as little as I possibly can. I'm trying to figure out how I could just throw it in the ISO mirror and forget it. but find ways of communicating without the digital systems. I'm a hypocrite. I'm saying to this, I'm speaking to you through one of the digital systems. And I'm one of those people who loves digital technology. So I understand how hard it is sometimes to rebuild the analog in your life. Forget QR code, just don't do this. And for God's sakes, keep, one very important aspect of this is to keep analog records. I'm always trying to get everybody to archive their financial world and not be dependent on the digital systems. Anyway, but just balance your life analog, digital. And part of that is making sure that your mind, your physical health is as deeply connected to the forest or the ocean as it is to, the internet. So part of it's a health thing. I've seen people who were, spend way too much time on their computer or internet, of which I'm one. And then they leave, and for 2 weeks, they're just completely off system. Their whole electromagnetic body is like totally different and totally, much healthier. So I think part of it is just doing it in a way that embraces health and, in your life. Then, for God's sakes, everywhere in your life, whether it's your local leadership or your civic leadership or your political leadership, there are tremendous leaders doing amazing things. Support them. Just, pick one or two out that you can support, whether you support them financially or with volunteer time or whatever. But just stop paying attention to the bad guys and start giving your time and attention and support to the good guys. And when I mentioned what's happening in the stock market, this is exactly what citizens are doing. They are rejecting the people. So CNN in 2020 and 2021 lied to people. I mean, badly lied. And literally in March of 2022, they announced a streaming service. They were shooting for, I think, 29 million customers. They got 10,000 and had to shut it down after a month.
Wow.
That's a reject. We need to reject the unhealthy and embrace the healthy. So I every week on the Solari Report, we have a hero of the week, and then we have a hero of the year. When people say, why is no one doing anything? Are you crazy? There are fabulous people everywhere doing amazing things, risking their lives. In our top stories for the 20th story, we put up all our best rants. There are amazing leaders who are just out there just doing amazing things. I mean, because you're one of them.
Thank
support
you.
them. Just support them. Just support them.
Yeah,
If
but
if you if you took all the money and attention we were giving to the bad guys and swung it to the good guys, it's unbelievable what can happen.
yes, no, you're absolutely right. And I think sometimes people are having a hard time finding all of us out there. That's also another problem I find, that someone comes across my work sometimes and then they write to me on Telegram or somewhere and they're like, where can I find it? And, do you know of others? And I usually point them, to everyone I know and that does amazing, great work. But I think still we are so censored. So, it's so hard for people, and including myself, because I know when I moved back to Sweden from the US, I knew the whole medical freedom community in New York, but I knew no one in Sweden. So it took me a while to identify
Really?
everything. Which it does,
Yeah.
and it's kind of hard. But maybe that's something we should think about for the future to come up with some sort of a
So
system.
so go into Solari, put hero into the search box, and you'll just pick up years and years of, announcements every week of who the hero of the week is and then hero of the year. And
Amazing.
we also will publish a list of the new media. We have what's called a new media syndicate, which is sort of 50 of the websites we track and people we listen to. And I just think there's such a explosive wealth of great people.
Yeah, and that's a
And
great resource to have,
yeah.
that they're listed there so people can find them. That's
Well, but
amazing.
if they on most of the new media websites, they branch and link to lots of other new media
Yeah.
websites, and you can pretty much. I don't know. I don't find it hard to. Now, I'm spoiled because I spend all my time with people who are doing this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All my time.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. Let me tell you a story, and because I'm very grateful. I decided to leave the establishment, and it took a long time to transition and find. You have to find your tribe. It took me a long time to find my tribe, but once you find your tribe, life is great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just great. You just meet the greatest people. And I was in Washington having breakfast with a guy who had been a congressman when I was there. He had left. We were having breakfast and we decided to walk across Union Station because the restaurant was noisy. We wanted to go to another restaurant. And one of the senators who commutes from home had come in on a train and was walking across. And so they were friends. And the senator was new, so he wasn't a senator when I was there, so I hadn't met him. Anyway, so my friend introduces him to me, and I said, how do you do? And he's being polite. He says, what do you do? And I said, well, Senator, I published something called the Solari Report, which means I go where I want, and I interview who I want, and I write about what I want, and I research what I want, and I collaborate with whoever I want about whatever I'm interested in. And they pay me to do that. And he looked at me. I was trying to be funny. And this wave of grief went over his face, and he said, oh my God, how can I get that job? I said, Senator, the apprenticeship is a little rough. And he laughed, but what I realized was, his job was brutal. He had a brutal job. It was hard because when you're in that machinery, it's not fun anymore. It's really not fun anymore. Yeah.
Very true. I would not go back to the UN. If I could choose between this and my tribe now and what I'm doing, never.
So I met in October when I was in the States, I met Dr. Merrick, Paul Merrick. Do you know him?
Yes.
And he's a wonderful man. And I said, how have you found this journey? And he said, well, I lost my practice, I lost my license, and I lost my wife, and I lost my family. And then he looked at me, and a big smile came over his face. He says, but I've met the most fabulous people, and I'm having a great time.
Yes, exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
And that also lifts us up, right? Because the work we're doing every day is very hard. I'm working with vaccine injured, and it's a heartbreaking job, and you have to stay focused, right? So sometimes I have to really just, and I mean, I've been trained for this because I used to work in post-conflict at the UN with child soldiers, so I'm pretty
really
trained.
Horrible.
Yeah, it was devastating, but you need to learn how to focus so that you can help and stay focused.
Right.
And I think that taught me something for what I'm doing now. But it's in between all of this, we need to come together and have fun together and enjoy time together and get to know each other, because I feel like, all of you now are my family, my new family, my tribe that I found, and I would never change that for anything in the world. So I'm also very grateful, like you, and totally agree with you 100%.
So one of the thing our team uses is we have this thing called a state of amusement. It's like the Buddha. We try to maintain a state of amusement, and some of the funniest times are when we'll come in for our weekly meeting, and somebody says, "I've lost my state of amusement."
It happens.
And then that's the challenge. Yeah. How do we get our state of amusement back?
It takes some effort, but it's definitely doable with all of us. And I think, just coming back from Florida now with the whole leadership, I mean, it's just such a beautiful, loving place. I think so many people are just, it's just so different from anything I think any of us have experienced before, because we're conscious. We know so much. A lot of people, I mean, it's just, we take care of each other in a very different way. And I think it's so important. And that community part is so important, right? And I think this is also something for this year that needs to happen, is, that people identify their community and their tribe and stop trying to please people that are no longer, in like good for them,
Well, here's what I find. When you come into alignment with a group of people, that alignment makes it possible to get something done. And as you get things done, the people who were on the fence or were naysayers see that you're getting somewhere and you're having more fun than they are, and then they come over. Have you ever seen the video of the dancing guy? The first guy who's dancing is weird. The second guy who joins him, they start to go. Then a few people, and then the crowd who was looking at them thinking they're weird are saying, they're having more fun than we are.
Exactly. And right. we do actually. We had now in Florida a whole day at the farm, and then we came out there. We ate food, sustainable food. It was a farm off the grid in Orlando. So we took a tour out there. We all had great food. They cooked for us. We had music. We had speeches. Everyone was laughing. It was just, those things are really needed too, in the midst of all this craziness that goes on, because otherwise you can't stay sane anymore.
So I wanted to tell you a story that happened to me on the Solari Report. There was a woman, she was a naturopath named Dr. Gwen Scott, and she'd been a very successful journalist and then had left journalism and become a naturopath, and had done a huge amount on spraying. What is in the spraying and what does it do to our bodies and how do you reverse the damage, including Morgellons disease. She was trying to heal people who had Morgellons. And I was at one point, I had interviewed her to talk about what is in the spray and what does it do to our bodies and then how do we protect ourselves. But it was one of the most negative pre-interviews I ever did. And so I called her back and I said, we're not going to discuss about what's in it and what it does to your body. We're just going to talk about all the steps you can take to heal yourself and just cut right to the solutions. And she listened to my presentation of the 10 top solutions and she said, well, dear, that's very good, but you forgot the most important one. And I said, what's that? And she said, if you look at what's going on, we should all be dead, but we're not. So something else is happening. And what she then rolled out, she said, I call that grace. And she, along with several other people I've interviewed, focused on how important it is not just to take action, but first to create a field. If we're going to present real solutions, the solution has to involve a culture that is a culture that you desire to be in and you want to be in.
Yes.
That's what you're describing, what you did in Florida. You were creating a field. You were building a field. You were nurturing a field. And so it's not a matter of rushing around in a way that makes us incoherent. It's a matter of being and projecting and nurturing a field that really offers an alternative.
100%.
Yeah.
So diving just a little bit deeper into, what we have spoken about, do you have any examples of groups that have managed to get out of the grip of the establishment and the globalists that have been successful and, been able to completely live separately?
So yes and no. You mentioned earlier the Amish when we were talking
Yeah.
beforehand, and that's clearly it's one group. I don't know a lot of, I don't know a lot about the Amish directly from the Amish. I have a lot of allies who've explained sort of economically how they do it, and it can be done. But I think you need uh, to 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 seriously make an effort to live outside of the existing systems. You have to understand. One, you have to be brought together by values. You have to be value
Yeah.
or faith based. It doesn't have to be necessarily a religious faith, but I think you do need spiritual faith. And you need a vision of the world that is not hyper materialist. I've never seen a group of hyper materialists who could do it because you can always bribe them back. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but then you also need to understand the kind of invisible warfare you're dealing with. Now, in my experience, the Amish have that knowledge and sort of transmit it generation to generation, and that helps them stay separate. But and what I'm told, and again, I haven't gotten this directly from the Amish, if they avoid civil contracts, then they can avoid taxation, and that's part of what makes the taxation go, along with the fact that they continue to nurture and preserve very valuable farmland. So, and of course, they have lower energy prices than the rest of us, particularly now. So they figured out a variety of ways of making the the economics work, but they're astute about the invisible weaponry that they're up against. And where I find most people fall down is they're not astute about, they don't understand the invisible weaponry that they're up against. They don't, it's what I call the control grid. If you come into Soleri, we've done a whole series of pieces on the control grid and how it works. One of them was a 12-part series called Deep State Tactics 101. I did an introductory interview called The Control Grid. I can't believe it, somebody's drilling outside.
But I can't actually hear it, so it's good.
Oh, good, that's good, because I live in a very rural area. I can't believe there's somebody drilling right outside the window. Anyway, they are doing construction on the street. But Ulrich Goniger and I recorded something called Control and Freedom Happen One Person at a Time. And if you look at how the control grid works, we described three main lines of how the control grid works, but all of them track and work on you individually. In other words, in the days when the Stasi was, tracking activists, you had teams of human beings watching other human beings. Now you have ANI software that is tracking you, and in fact, you have multiple AI and software, one's tracking you for Amazon, one's tracking you for Google, and one's tracking you for the government. So you've got these multiple AI and software, and they are on you 24/7, like a Stasi team. It's Mr. Smith from the Matrix. And you are controlled and manipulated, and you're thinking nudged or influenced one person at a time. And it's really one person at a time. And that's an alien thought for most people to realize the fight I'm having with the Matrix is between me and the Matrix, and it's intimate, and it's, I'm dealing with something that is designed just to track me. What most people tell you is, oh, I'm not important. My account's too small. I don't have enough money. Wrong. They track and manipulate every cent. Yeah. And they're very, they're surprisingly, I remember in the 90s when I was an investment banker in Washington, I would read and study Rupert Sheldrake and morphogenic fields. And I was very interested in morphogenic fields because it explained the market phenomena that I was watching. In other words, if you tried to re-engineer how the money worked in a place, it behaved according to the theories of morphogenic fields. It behaved according to the market dynamics I was taught at the Wharton Business School. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So Rupert Sheldrake was describing money to me much better than, business theory. Anyway, but it wasn't until I started to litigate with the Department of Justice that I realized a lot of their covert operations was designed to manipulate and manage the fields. And if you look at how they target people, like if you look at the targeted individuals, They target people who are influential in the field, not people who are influential in the media.
Yeah,
And they understand a lot about this field management thing. It was quite amazing. And I never really believed, or I was never confident that field management is that important until I saw sort of the control technology and how it really behaved. Why is this doing this?
Yeah, totally. And I also had a question to you about what counterattacks and ugly methods can Mr. Global deploy to crush attempts to create these independent and free communities? Because this is something I'm thinking about a lot. Okay, we can create our parallel communities here and there, but can't they just get in there and totally take us in and do whatever they want with us? I mean, they have military.
Yeah, so there are many different tactics. And as I said, I would listen to Control and Freedom happen one person at a time. The first thing they can do, of course, they have lots of divide and conquer. And their favorite divide and conquer is to turn the men and women against each other. And after that, it's the different generations. So if you can build a community where the men and women really support and help each other, and where the different generations help and support each other, if you can get men and women working together and the different generations working together, then you can beat off a lot of divide and conquer and sabotage. It's unbelievable. So, but that's a challenge. I used to be for 10 years, I was an investment advisor, and I constantly found that you can trick a man and you can trick a woman. But if a man and woman work together on the money, they're almost impossible to trick. And that's, I would get these couples where one of the spouses would say, I don't want to be involved. I want the other spouse to do the money. And I said, no, I don't care. You have to both be involved, and here's why. It's essential so that you don't get tricked. It's really a risk management tool. Okay, so you beat the divide and conquer. The second thing is, if you come to Soleri and you put mind control in the search box, you'll get a collection of the best links on tactics used to persuade people to, adopt ideas or actions that are against their own best interest. And it's a wide selection, from propaganda to entrainment, subliminal programming, to literally neurological weapons used by the military. There are a couple of lectures at the bottom of that collection of links by James Giordano and Charles Morgan to the military on neurological weaponry. And, it's pretty phenomenal, the tools they have available. So that's the second thing. The third thing is buying people out. So I used to, throughout the last 25 years, I can't tell you how many wonderful people I've had bought away from working with me. And I used to say, this is how I bless you. If you'll team up with me and we start to get things done, they'll buy you away. And this is how I can bless you. But,
great.
A perfect example, I had a wonderful reporter decide she was going to, when I was litigating, she was going to sort of blow the cover on what was happening. And so I ended up having to go to Kinko's, and I had about 3 boxes of legal documents I shipped her. This is before we put them up on the internet. And I shipped her everything, and she called me and she said, you're not going to believe this. Last year I tried to raise money for this company I wanted to start, and it was a bust, so I gave up. But out of the blue, I just got a call. Somebody's willing to fund, I think it was $1 million for me to start this company. So I'm sending all your boxes back. I can't rock the story. And I said, this is how I bless people. It was one of the big investment banks that was going to get outed for the mortgage fraud. And they financed her company. Wow. For them, it was a very economic and smart move. But yeah, there you go. Yeah. So they buy people, critical people, and that sort of implodes efforts. So those are 3 of the ways. But here's the thing. If you look at all the different ways I can sabotage your effort, it's like the joy of cooking. There are thousands of recipes. I mean, it's unbelievable, because managing and herding the population is the greatest job program on the planet. You would not believe, I have an online book called Dylan Reed and the Aristocracy of Stock Profits, and I would recommend it to people, because I wrote it when the litigation was over. I said, I have to write what happened, because people, will be looking at this and saying, why did that mess happen? So I said, okay, I need to write it up before I go back into the business world. And the hardest thing for me to do during that period was, why don't they just kill me? This is very expensive, because they had me under 24/7 surveillance. They were doing all these weird harassment things. There were smear campaigns. There was litigation. There were 12 tracks of litigations, 18 audits and investigations. I finally calculated, including all the court cases, it was like $45 million that the government spent. I said, why don't you just kill me and save $44.5 million? And then I realized, first of all, they need to make it look like the appearance.
Yeah.
There's an appearance of law. But the other thing is, it's a huge business. I mean, it's government contractors, right? It's a huge business. Anyway, it took me forever to figure out the economics of why this would work for them, because I just couldn't fathom that anybody would spend that much money, on this one squabble. But I assure you, if you are a central banker and you print money, they can print, hundreds of billions of dollars to follow people around and, chase them and persuade them, and and now we have this new nudging thing, right? So, well, I'm sure you saw it. I once sat down with somebody who'd been fairly senior at the UN, and he described how much money they spent on grants and programs, and he just said it was unbelievable how much money they spent hiring people, keeping them busy, having them push certain things. It was like a tsunami of money.
Yeah, I remember I had a colleague that came to me, and he was super angry and super depressed, and it was at the time when they were doing the peacekeeping operation in Sudan. And he said to me, he's like, Aga, I'm so depressed because I just found out how the budget for Sudan. And he said, we pumped in $3 billion into that mission. And guess how much actually went to actual programs on the ground? And I said, well, tell me. He's like, 3 million.
Right.
And that's when I was like, holy, what am I doing here? What is this organization really doing? How can this money be spent? When I saw so many of these small organizations, local ones, where the people that worked for them were local people with the hearts in the right place, and you would give them $20,000 and they would make miracles with that money, saving so many people. Nothing went into operational costs. They put everything into that. So I always said, to my colleagues, why don't you pump money into these small organizations on the ground? Because they get things done. You don't, That was always the thing that I really got me to realize and wonder, what am I doing here? Because it's not working.
Right. It takes a long time. You see the same, I was an assistant secretary at HUD, and I used to find these situations where I said, they'd say, we want to spend $1 million to spend this university to go in and teach, do tutoring. I said, that's ridiculous. Call up the local churches, get the grandmothers to come out and teach kids. It'll be fine. You don't need to spend any money. And they were like, no, we want to give $1 million to this university. So that's never going to work, because the kids aren't going to relate to those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think, rounding up, I would want to ask you maybe for an inspiring message for 2023, or something you want to say to the audience.
So every person on this planet has two choices. They can walk into the control grid and complete control. So you can walk into a world where your car, your community, your house is a digital concentration camp. Or you can turn and say, I'm going to pull out of the control grid, and I'm going to make my contribution. I'm going to find my tribe, and I'm going to make my contribution. I will be free. I'm a great believer in creating. I want to do more than survive. I want to be free. I want to thrive. So you create that vision for yourself, and you just start turtling towards it. And you have to enjoy the journey, because this is a major fight. It's a fight for all the marbles. A lot of evil things are happening now, and they're going to keep happening until we we break through. The central bankers know that with the advent of digital technology, if they don't get central control, they're going to lose control. But we're going to help them lose control for once and for all. So, and then we have to invent a human civilization. So, so enjoy that journey and find your tribe in that journey. And I have to tell you, just as somebody who's on that journey, there's no better place to be at this time. I mean, look at the people like you I get to hang out with. I mean, look at Aga. Don't you want to be like her? Come on. Right?
Thank you, Catherine. I mean, just talking to you inspires me so much, because you just have that like light and love and everything about you, that you're spreading. And I'm very grateful, that you are here on this planet doing what you're doing and doing an incredible job.
Well, no, I appreciate you. And something, we're on a journey. We're making it up. We're in the invention room. Welcome to 2023 in the invention room.
A fun invention room where we get to laugh more and be more together, I feel. So yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in person again and definitely talk more to you, because you're doing amazing work. And I know the Solari report is one of the best resources out there right now, for sure. But also, if you could share maybe other places where people can find you and your work.
So we do a TV show. My general counsel and I do a TV show on CHD TV every week called Financial Rebellion. If you come into Solari, we're a subscription service, but we have a ton of free stuff, and we're publishing free stuff all the time. But we're also pointing, we're kind of a hub that points to a lot of the new media syndicate. I had dreadful experiences when I was in the Bush administration, and then when my company was a contractor in the Clinton administration. I just had terrible experiences with most corporate media, and I said, that's it. So we've been, since 1998, I've been working almost completely only with new media, and we just find a wealth of resources, and we link to all of them. We kind of see ourselves as a part of an open syndicate. So you can find a ton of that at Solari. And anyway, but we do the TV show on Financial Rebellion on CHT TV with Polly Tommy, who was the hero of the year at the Solari report.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Polly is amazing.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's
amazing. And then she, at CHD TV, they link to a ton of stuff. With Doctors for COVID Ethics, we do a symposium. We did 3 in 2022 with UK Column. And if you're looking for European news, they're fantastic. So you can find a wealth of media all over the world. And you'll find them through UK Column, CHD TV, through us, everywhere. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing your wisdom with us today. And I hope to talk to you soon again. And, for you doing everything that you're doing and for being you. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you.